The biggest takeaway from Alabama State spring game is quarterbacks, 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 and I love that for the Hornets. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. You see it behind me, and remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. We wrap up today's episode with a look at the HBCU prospects who have announced and declared themselves as participants in the WNBA Draft. It's 3 of our ladies. Prior to that, 1 of the WNBA prospects of 2025, yes, I'm manifesting that, is Zaay Green. And she has left UAPB for the transfer portal. And I'm sorry, Lady Lion, she is not coming back. But what are her other 3 options? Let's kick this thing off, though, with a little bit of football. Let's kick this thing off with Alabama State because they had their spring game on Saturday. And the biggest takeaway from their spring game, the biggest takeaway from the black and gold game was quarterbacks, quarterbacks, quarterbacks. And this is phenomenal for Alabama State. I understand that having a quarterback is not the end-all be-all, but it makes everything significantly easier. It makes everybody significantly more confident. It makes everybody in the building walk a little different, right? Like you may slump a little bit. You may slump down when you walk. You may even have your head tilted to the floor. But when you have a quarterback, you trust in things. Your head begins to raise. Your shoulders begin to feel a little bit more broad. Your wingspan is a little bit wider and your back's a lot straighter because you know that quarterback is the most important position on the offense. I don't care if you're a run-first offense. You know that at one point your quarterback is going to have to make a play. So when you have somebody who can do that for you, yeah, you feel a whole lot better. When you're a fan, you feel a whole lot more confident. You probably talk a little bit more trash. And I understand that you have to have the offense and the defense. But here's my thing. I'm not just going to assume that Alabama State's defense will be as good as it was last year. But I understand that their offense can't be as bad as it was last year. So with that being said, what's going to be the priority when I'm evaluating their team? I'm going to look at offense and defense today, but we start off with offense because that's what needs to be fixed. You can't have that. So what do? They go get Andrew Body. And I know some people may say, well, Darian, Texas Southern alum, you ain't off the Andrew Body hype train? Don't you know he left Houston? Well, I must have fell asleep at my stop because I'm still on the train and I'm enjoying the ride because this isn't about riding for my quarterback. It was never about that. Like, it was never about riding for my quarterback. It was about evaluating talent and feeling like this was a good player. One thing I won't do is blindly have faith in somebody. I'm not doing that, right? So I wouldn't have come on here and said all of the things that I said about Andrew Body if I didn't actually believe that Body was one of the best quarterbacks in the SWAC. Well, he may have left TSU, but he didn't leave the conference. Therefore, I still feel like Andrew Body is one of, if not the best quarterback in the SWAC. And maybe we have to go through and look at the changing landscape of HBCU football because quarterbacks are leaving. Andrew Body isn't returning to his place, but he's returning in the conference. He's returning to football. He's somebody I've actually seen at this stage, and I feel like I can have an understanding of what he's going to be greater than other quarterbacks. And when I wanted to question what Andrew Body would do at Alabama State, I didn't question what Andrew Body could do at Alabama State. I questioned what he would be allowed to do at Alabama State. So when I hear that he has a 70-yard touchdown pass, a bomb, oh yeah, I'm excited. Oh yeah, I'm intense now. Now I'm here. because I know the talent that is Body, but I just want to know how much are they going to let him loose. They have a new offensive coordinator at Alabama State. I think that's important. And knowing that they're going to have him targeted downfield, that gets me excited. We'll see how much they do it because that's, it's only spring practice. Of course, they took a shot deep. Like it even with D Davis, even with Damon Stewart, they still took shots deep. But it's about how much are they going to try to stretch the field. That's to be determined, right? Another thing that's to be determined is who's going to step up at the receiver position. We named 3 guys on Friday when kind of previewing this game a little bit. It wasn't McMinn, right? Like that's not who showed up in this game. It wasn't I really want to say Merritt. I don't know why I want to call this guy Ja'Cory Merritt so bad right now. That's funny, but let me see. Who did I forget? Because I want to make sure I get all 3 of these guys and not have a brain fart. So it wasn't McMinn. It wasn't Jones. It wasn't Saunders. It ended up being Eric Horn. And Eric Horn was a player who I didn't hear as much about in the articles that I was reading to keep up with what was going on with Alabama State. So it was Eric Horn, recipient of that 70-yard touchdown pass. You had Bakari Daly, who they said was operating out of slot with great efficiency. You have Derek Harden at the tight end position. My only thing about them is I have to question how good they're going to be. I can't get super confident. I'm excited because I think that if Alabama State has an offense in 2023, they're neck and neck with FAMU. That's how good their defense was. If Andrew Body was healthy on this team, well, I don't even know because they ain't had no receivers outside of Keyshawn Johnson. But I would like to think that Andrew Body would have lifted this team to be better than they were. They would have been clearly the second best team as opposed to a conversation between 2 and 5, right? That's what it ended up being at the end of the conference or at the end of the year. I can't have too much confidence in these guys yet because there was nobody who showed me flashes in 2023 to where I could feel like, oh, they're just capitalizing on what I already believe. I think they needed a whole new slate of receiving talent. So, yeah, it's a little bit hard for me to get overly excited here. And then you look at on the other quarterback position, and I got this from Jerry Humphrey's article for the Montgomery Advisor, right? This was a quote. Zachary Sims also showed flashes of being a possible starter, leading the offense down the field for a second half score. Let's get this man a red shirt. I've compared Andrew Body and the potential usage in a run-first offense to Davius Richard. That could just make Zach Sims Walker Harris. He had to sit behind for a little bit, but as him being a freshman, if he sits for a year, I think Body has 2 years of eligibility. I think he has 2 years of eligibility left because, that COVID year is kind of weird to me, but I think he has 2 years. So if you let Sims sit for a year as a redshirt, then he might have to sit another year. He can step in as a redshirt sophomore as your starting quarterback. When you tell me that he shows flashes of being a starter, and I'm just going to take it at face value, that gets me excited because the quarterback position has been depleted for this school. Like this has been a bad quarterback team for the last 3 years, or 2 years. That's just the truth of it, right? So yeah, I think Body can make it through the season. I don't think Body is this decrepit, broken down Body. No pun intended, but like he got hurt at the end of the 2022 season, and it was an injury that carried over into 2023. I don't look at him as some injury-prone guy. Some people may. I understand the narrative. I don't believe that that's true. I think that is a false narrative being put out. Now to the defense. So you have Stephon Young-Roll at the edge rusher position. Let's not even get into the talent that is Young-Roll yet. At the edge rusher position, you can transform a defense. And that's one of the 2 positions that are the premier positions in football that happen to be on the defensive side of the ball. Edge rusher, just with how the game is transforming into such a pass-heavy game, you care about the people who can catch the ball, throw the ball, stop the people from catching the ball, and stop the people from throwing the ball. And as an edge rusher, you can get pressures, and that's exactly what Young-Roll did in this game. I've heard about him doing it on a consistent basis in practice. I love Bubba Adams, but at his position, it's just not as valuable. I think that from a pure talent, throw intangibles out, from a pure talent standpoint, it's more difficult to be a game changer at the linebacker position than it is edge rusher, just because sacks have such a high value, right? And this is coming from me, somebody who loves the linebacker position, former linebacker. Like, this is coming from me, right? But yeah, so Bubba Adams, and also I seen some people like Cunningham, Dozier is in that mix. Guys who could try, right? I don't want to say will, but guys who can try to fill Bubba Adams' shoes. That's not an easy thing to do. I won't predict them to do it, but they can be good on the field. And I've heard that linebacking core does have talent, right? I've talked to some people and I've heard that there is good plays happening. So I'm not just going to throw away what I've heard for weeks. This is the final practice. This is not a game. It's not like, oh, the moment was too big. This is just a glorified practice. So I'm not going to throw away hearing what the linebackers have been doing over the last couple of weeks just because they didn't do it on this one particular day. But Stephon Young-Roll, he's done it every single week, and he showed up in the spring game. This is a player who, in my opinion, I will be watching very closely because he has the ability to wreck shop and transform and continue, I should say, not even transform, but continue a dominant stretch for Alabama State's defense. As we push forward, we're going to leave Alabama State. We're going to leave spring games, and we're going to move back over to women's basketball because Zaay Green, just like Dawn Thornton, is no longer a UAPB Lady Lion. And I know the transfer portal isn't final, but this move is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. I hope that you made a little bit of money on that last NCAA tournament game because, look, whether you pick Purdue, whether you pick UConn, the season's over. The final nets have been cut down. The final game has been played. It's now time to move on to another sport. Professional basketball, if you will. The NBA playoffs are right on the horizon. The NFL draft is right on the horizon. You have all of these options for you to make money. Just because the college basketball game is over does not mean that all of the money that you can be made is down the drain. NHL is here. MLB is here. Everything in between. So you have drafts, playoffs, regular seasons in two different sports. The time is here. The time is now, right? So go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. If you're new to FanDuel, you get $200 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 winning bet. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. It's the first of its kind, 24/7 live sports network on YouTube. Go to Locked On Sports Today to subscribe. I want to go ahead and say something real quick because I was so caught up in Dawn Thornton and her moving from UAPB to Alabama A&M that I forgot to give a shout out to another Dawn, right? So shout out to Dawn Staley in South Carolina for winning their third national championship in the women's NCAA tournament. I think that's phenomenal. I know I was rooting for her, and I know that many of us were as well. So congratulations to Dawn Staley. She's never been shy to show love to us, so I will not be shy to show love to her. Now, that being said, let's get into today's programming. Zaay Green has hit the portal, and I have three options on what could happen next. None of those are a return to UAPB. The first domino is dropped. The first domino has dropped, and that is Zaay Green. You see that on my Twitter, at South Exclusions, if you're looking for it. That was one of the things I called for yesterday. One of the things I called for yesterday was what's going to happen with Amaya Simmons and what's going to be next with Zaay Green. Those are the questions that I had. Those are the questions that I wanted to be answered. I thought that they were the most important questions after Dawn Thornton had moved on from UAPB to Alabama A&M. That's what it was for me. And now we have our answer to one of those questions. Zaay Green is leaving UAPB. And listen, this was 2 days after when Mo texted me this morning, he texted me like 9 o'clock in the morning, right? He was like, hey, Zaay Green in the portal. And I low-key jumped for joy because I had told him already, look, she hadn't made that decision when I was getting ready to record. And I took the chance of recording early in hopes that she wouldn't make that decision on Sunday night. And she didn't. She made it Monday morning, 4 hours after I dropped my episode. Whew, I was so happy, right? But now let's get to what's next because there's three options for her. I knew once Dawn Thornton left that Zaay Green wasn't far behind. I couldn't be 100% certain But I can tell you what I confidently felt like she wasn't going to stay at UAPB. So now that she's left UAPB, what are the next three options? Well, there's go one right on the table, right in front of you. She could follow her coach to Alabama A&M. And I think that is, to me, that's the most likely. I think that's the one that many people probably would predict. It just makes sense. And one image that I can't get out of my head is when Zaay Green announced that she was coming back for another year to college basketball, that she wasn't going to put her name into the WNBA draft. Notice when I said this, I said she's a WNBA prospect in 2025. I do think that she is that kind of talent. I do think that with a good enough year, she could put herself in contention to possibly get drafted. We'll look at everybody else's draft stock after this. But for me, I can't get that image out of my head of Dawn Thornton and Zaay Green sitting up there together. Because when I see Green up there, there was a, oh, you ain't think this was going to happen sense of energy. There was a, we about to F y'all up sense of energy. Y'all. That's the operative word, y'all. Because it felt like she sat there united with her coach. It wasn't just, I'm going to do this. It was, me, Zaay Green, and Dawn Thornton next year are going to mess the game up. That's what I felt. That's what I heard. That's what I took from it. So when Dawn Thornton leaves and then Zaay Green enters the portal, it's very difficult for me not to feel like they're just going to go mess the game up at Alabama A&M. It's very difficult for me to feel like I'm not saying that Green is, connected to Thornton by like Siamese twins or not. Like, I'm not saying that. But it looked like a partnership. The way they addressed the issue felt like a partnership. Everything about it felt like me and you against the world. So now that you leave, unless Green felt away, which could happen, right? Like, I thought it was me and you versus the world. How you just going to leave me now? If she didn't feel that way, it can still be her and those two women against the world. But it wouldn't just be those two women, because then you could get a Maya Simmons. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself because this is about Zaay Green. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself because this is about Zaay Green. What's the other choices? Because I think that's the most obvious. It's probably the one that most people would predict. But then you have another route that says, no, I'm just going to leave. And I brought that up yesterday, right? You have the option to follow your coach, or you could just go a different direction and leave your coach. Now that brings up two different options, because for one, she could just go to another FCS school, or excuse me, mid-major school. Sometimes I get them mixed up. But she could go to another mid-major school. Okay, cool. Got you. Hear you loud and clear. But she could go Power 5. And I seen somebody say that. And that caught me off guard. And I think that's really what made me want to dive into all of these options. Zaay Green going Power 5 would be extremely interesting because she's been at 2 Power 5 schools already. She started off at Tennessee. Then she ended up going to Texas A&M. Now she's at UAPB. These aren't even close schools, to be honest with you, right? Like, yeah, you have 2 SEC schools. Maybe she could go a different direction after that. But it feels like she finally found a home. And she showed some sparks. Don't get me wrong. She's done some things here and there. I wouldn't even say sparks, but she's done some things here and there at Tennessee and Texas A&M. But she found a home at UAPB. She found a home with Dawn Thornton. And I just feel like if she's going to move on from UAPB, and I know that entering your name into the transfer portal is not a finality. You can always come back. But the timing of her doing it tells me she's not coming back, right? I just think it would make the most sense to go on with your coach, continue this me and you versus the world attitude, add Amaya Simmons, add Kayla Turner, add Alicia Wilson, add Maya Pete. I didn't mention Pete. I should have mentioned her yesterday when talking about some of the transfers from UAPB. But I don't think she's entered the portal yet. So I think that's a little bit of a difference. I'm just saying, I think it works. So you have 3 options. You can leave your head coach, go just elsewhere, just go somewhere else. You go Power 5, or you could just join your head coach. I would probably say joining the head coach is by far, for me, the most likely, and is what I expect to happen. But I wouldn't be shocked for either one of the other two. It's probably 60, 30, or what? 60, 20, 20. Yeah, let's go with that. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna go with. So as we push forward, we're gonna look at players who are in the same position as Zaay Green will be next year. Hopefully, fingers crossed. And that's an HBCU player who is who is entering the WNBA draft. We have 3 players. Let's look at their chances to be drafted as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. The WNBA draft is less than a week away. It's on April 15th. That is the upcoming Monday. In 2022, Amisha Williams Holiday out of Jackson State broke a long draft when she was the long drought, when she was the first HBCU player drafted in the WNBA draft in a long time, 20 years. She was drafted by the Indiana Fever. Didn't work out for it. It is what it is. This year, there's 3 players who have put their name into the pool. 3 HBCU players, and let's break them down. Let's kick it off with somebody from the same school as Amisha Williams Holiday, and that is Angel Jackson, who is, in my opinion, by far the best prospect as far as having a chance to get drafted. Like I don't even think it's remotely close. I don't. And that's why we're going to spend the majority of the time talking about her. She comes from a program that has a little bit of success. She comes from a program that people are, I'm not going to say used to succeeding, but it's not unfamiliar to them. She comes from Jackson State, a team that's won multiple SWAC titles, has been a 14 seed multiple times. It was a big deal both times, right? Like if there's any HBCU in women's college basketball that has national acclaim or is gaining national acclaim, it's Jackson State. And pedigree of your school, of your university, really does work in the favor of players. But let's take that aside. She also came from USC. And it's not that USC has been phenomenal all of these years, right? They had a drought up until this past year. Shout out Juju. But it's not just that. It's that, oh, you have a high ceiling. And she had a couple of double-doubles while she was at USC. Then she came to Jackson State. And once she came to JSU, back-to-back defensive players of the year. But last year wasn't good enough. Angel Jackson had to go ahead and increase. Angel Jackson had to become a larger paint presence than she already was. Surprise, surprise. The woman who is 6'6" is a really good defensive presence, not only in the SWAC, but in college basketball in general. The reason I want to make sure I say that is A, people use that to write them off, but then B, I saw her against Aaliyah Edwards, a potential top 10 pick in this year's WNBA draft. And I saw what Angel Jackson was able to do on the defensive side of the ball. She got a couple of blocks. She had really good feet. I thought she was a really good defensive stopper, and that's what you're asking from her. You're not asking for her to come in and drop 30. You're not asking for her to come in and drop 40. You want her to play good defense. And as long as she can give you good defense, then you'll be a happy person, right? Whether you're looking at a fan, a coach, a teammate, that's what you're asking from her. Playing her role, and she's done that very well. So she jumped from, I think she nearly doubled her block total. It was a massive jump, however much it was. You look at her steal total, she did double that. She went from not even averaging half a steal a game to averaging nearly 1 steal a game. This is her back-to-back run that could lead to her being a very late draft pick. I'm not confident, but it's a very late draft pick. If there was one person I had to ask about, it'll be her. Right? The blocks were one thing, but the steals were another. Then you have 2 players from the D2 ranks, and Amari Hurd and Nye Langley. Langley was an all-conference forward, right? She ended up being 8th in the CIAA in points, 5th in the conference in rebounds, and she was a really good scorer and rebounded for Virginia Union. That's what she did extremely well. And the forward is, or excuse me, the forward, Langley, the forward. I'm talking like I'm writing. But Langley, to me, she did a lot of the things that Amari Hurd did. And Amari Hurd is out of Savannah State in the SIAC. And they had similar numbers, around 14 points, a little over 7.5 boards, right around that range. Hurd comes in 5th in points, 6th in rebounds in the conference, 3rd in the conference in assists. So she did a lot for Savannah State the same way that Langley did for Virginia Union. But in my opinion, the streak will continue, right? The streak is building up. When Amisha Williams Holiday was drafted, it was the first player in 20 years. I don't think either of these 3 players will be drafted. Angel Jackson getting a late draft pick wouldn't stun me, but it would surprise me because I saw what Amisha Williams Holiday had to do. And with all due respect, her resume is better than any of these three women. And she was the first pick in the last round, the third round. Amisha Williams Holiday was a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. In her final year, she was the SWAC Player of the Year. Had multiple championships while she was there at Jackson State. And just in my opinion, she had to do so much to be the first overall or the first pick in the third round. That set the bar. When I look at girls like Shakila Hill, when I look at what they've done, like these are decorated players. And I know how the HBCU athletic scene is looked at. I just kind of doubt that any of these three women are going to get picked because none of them have a conference player of the year last year. Jackson has back-to-back defensive players of the year, but I don't know if that'll be enough. She's a really good talent, and I would like to see her get a chance, but maybe you end up seeing an overseas contract for her. I don't know. I'm hoping. That's the one person I'm hoping for. So we'll see. We'll see if Jackson State can do it again. They had an HBCU player picked in 20 years. Now you get 2 and 3. We'll see. But I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Speaking of Jackson State, let's go ahead and keep it rolling with them. Let's go ahead and talk about their spring game tomorrow. So I know that you guys will be excited for that. I am excited for that because this is year 2 of the TC era. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day for the year 3 of the Mouth of the South era. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.